The Aerocon 1.6 Wingship was on a scale that could only be described as massive, even gargantuan. Consider its payload alone, which was no less than 1,400 tons. That equated to the ability to transport 3,000 civilian passengers during peacetime, or for military purposes, haul 2,000 troops, plus helicopters, tanks, landing craft, and other military hardware, such as armaments. In the mid-80s, one man had a dream. A dream of an aeroplane that would be almost 10 times bigger than that of the Soviet Union's Caspian Sea Monster. After all, everything is bigger in America. It was so large that it was essentially a flying city, with enough seats for thousands of passengers, enough room to house everything from hospitals to five-star dining, or given military application, hundreds of tanks, and perhaps even carry nuclear warheads. But why? Why was it planned? And who was the madman behind this fever dream? And why was the military reluctant to replace aircraft carriers forever? This is the story of one of the largest aircraft ever designed, the Aerocon Wingship. Our story begins 20 years earlier with the rise of Boeing, rock and roll, and the aeroplane. Spies had reported a new type of machine deep within the Soviet Union that was so advanced, so cutting edge, that it started its own category of aircraft. By using what is known as the ground effect, the aeroplane could ride a bubble of air above the waves, faster than a boat, and carry much more than a regular aircraft. In fact, it was predicted that there would be no upward size limit for such a machine, and the Soviet Union was already planning everything from troop transports to aircraft carriers. And all of this wasn't lost on the Americans. In fact, one American in particular got totally obsessed. Stephen Hooker was this man. Hooker was an aeronautical engineer whose obsession was first stoked with aeroplanes when he witnessed the famous Caspian Sea Monster in 1967. Hooker was working with the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, at the time that discovered what the Soviets were working on. He became so convinced of the potential of this type of aircraft that he resigned from his post in 1983 in order to design and develop a viable American version. By 1984, he had founded his company, Aerocon, in order to develop a ground effect aircraft with a formidable cargo capacity for both military and commercial passenger payloads. Hooker wanted the craft to have the range of a small ship, and being a ground effect vehicle anyway, called his concept the Wingship, which is why the term was adopted in the name of the project. His vision was simple and even a little mad. He wanted to build an aeroplane that would be almost 10 times bigger than the Soviet Union's version, and this is exactly what it looked like. This aircraft was made for transatlantic travel between America and Europe. A test example of its cargo capacity is worth highlighting, and it makes quite the list. 32 helicopters, 20 tanks, 4 landing craft, 300 rounds for howitzers, and that's not counting the 2,000 troops and their equipment and food that was included in the manifest as well. To fly this all airborne, it would have been powered by no less than 2,400 kilonewton engines, enough to power the Aerocon 1.6 to a range of 10,000 nautical miles, or make that 18,500 kilometers with a maximum flight distance. That's a very big range for a very, very big aircraft. This capacity and range would allow the US military or its civil applications to project force or fly passenger routes almost anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. Imagine 2,000 soldiers showing up at your door 8 hours later. That's how incredible the design was. It was so big that the Aerocon 1.6 had impressive stats as well. The aircraft would stand at 34 meters tall and be 173 meters long. It would boast a wingspan of 100 meters with a total wing area of 3,597 square meters. Aerocon contended that the airship's large, wide wings would provide it with a clearance of waves of up to 6 meters or 20 feet in height. This would allow the airship to operate perfectly well over quite rough seas if needed, something that had always plagued the aeroplanes of the Soviet design. For comparison, the Aerocon Wingship, with a total weight of 1,627 tons, would be over 12 times the weight of a Boeing 747, but critically, it would be able to carry 30 times the payload than the Boeing aircraft could, which again is why the US military was so interested. Aerocon argued that because it weighed so much, 5,000 tons when fully loaded, it would be highly efficient, because the induced drag is reduced when closer a wing gets to the surface, such as water. The large, wide wing of the 1.6 Wingship would ensure optimized surface ground effect with very little induced drag. This result would also be more fuel efficient per ton of payload than anything flying in the sky today. It would actually fly at a top speed of 741 kilometers per hour and be able to fly up to 4,600 meters, which is understandably quite low by aviation standards, but considering it was designed to take full advantage of the ground effect, it is very unlikely that they would have ever used this flight model. Aesthetically, it was somewhat ungainly in the opinion of some people at the time. The Aerocon airship looked like a cross between a space shuttle and the Caspian Sea Monster. So not very attractive, but boy were those payloads attractive. Particular focus would be on the craft's ability to increase the airlift and sea lift capabilities of the United States military. You know, so they could knock on the door of the next dictator by dinner time. The DARPA report found that the proposed ground effect craft was at least 5 times larger than what was recommended by American and Russian experts, some of which had actually worked on the original aeroplan. The current technology, that is of 1995, simply wasn't available to build so large a ground effect craft. The report therefore concluded that the project was not technologically or financially viable, although it did conclude that there would be promising military applications for wingships in the 400 to 1,000 ton range, so approximately 5 times smaller than our boy here. One DARPA team member was even quoted as saying, "It's like asking the Wright brothers how much a 747 would cost." Nevertheless, the Aerocon proposal was rejected, never to be considered again by the US military. Supporting the channel, and I want to say thanks to those who do. Thanks for watching!